election jai ya comrade collect kun mana as pialamba win as pialamba fall ya comrade collect kun mana banadum for election jai ya comrade collect kun mana as pialamba win as pialamba fall ya comrade collect give mana nudwan for election jai ya comrade collect kun mana as pialamba win as pialamba fall ya comrade collect give mana.
Our next speaker is Dr. David Bassiouni. دكتور ديفيد بسيوني راجل بقول عليه بالعربي شنو غنى عن التعريف. We all know him as an elder, and his biography is almost 3 pages there. So I'm not going to go through all of that. You can read it for yourself, and you can see how rich and experienced a man we have among us here today. And I'm very happy, and it's my honor to introduce him because he's a veterinarian. He's a graduate of veterinary school in University of Khartoum. وراجل كان وزير بتاع الزراعة. And not that only, he's also is a master degree holder from Harvard University. If they can hold up, let me just. A master's degree in public administration from Harvard University, John F. Kennedy School of Government, as well as Parvin Fellowship from Princeton University. Dr. David Bassiouni is going to give us a speech regarding the current situation in South Sudan under the title of South Sudan at Crossroads, a Glimmer of Hope. Please welcome with me Dr. David Bassiouni.
Thank you, Dr. Mangal, for that very kind introduction. And greetings to all of you. First of all, Mr. Chairman of the Secretariat of SPLM in USA, Lado Gobek, the Chairman of the various chapters of SPLM, our very dear Ambassador of South Sudan to US, who is with us today, and the diplomats who have accompanied him. The representatives of the various political parties, it's an honor for us. Our women folk, though few in numbers, but not in strength. So you are most welcome. And our youth, and most importantly, our American friends who have always been with us and have given us shelter when we did not have a country. So thank you for that. Minnesota and Minneapolis and this university has had a number of associations with SPLM. In 2010, the first convention of SPLM in USA was conducted here. And I was the keynote address. I gave the keynote address. In last year, the new secretariat of SPLM was inaugurated here in this city. And now we're holding for the first time a very special gathering of all shades of political opinion in South Sudan. I will come back to this later on, that it has been held once in South Sudan, and this is the second time it is being held. So I want to compliment the chairman and your team and all those who took part in organizing this venue. It's important because, as I say in my remarks and my intervention, we are at a crossroads. And what happens now, and what happens from now onwards, is going to mean much to our country, to our people, to our nation. We're at a crossroad because after almost 22 months of conflict, our leaders have been able to reach an agreement, to sign an agreement, and they have gone further to even conclude a security arrangement for the interim period that is going to come into force with the interim government of national unity. That's a very important point in our history. And when I was asked to come, when I invited to come and speak, I welcomed it because I think there is hope. I think we are going to emerge out of this crisis, and we're going to restore normality to our country. We're going to restore confidence, and we're going to restore trust in ourselves. But the agreement is as we described. I think yesterday we benefited a lot from Ambassador Bak's presentation. There are reservations on all sides. It's not a perfect agreement. It's an imposed agreement, some say. It is a compromise agreement. But whatever agreement it is, whatever reservations we have with it, we must thank the President, Salva Mayardit, Dr. Riek Machar, and Pagan Amon for having signed this agreement and placing us at a different stage of where we were, because up to now it has been Addis Ababa talks, month after month, month after month. But I think we have actually crossed into a very different and a new stage. The challenge for us is to make it work. And I want to go back a little to talk about imposed agreements. This is not entirely new to South Sudan. During the war in former Yugoslavia, the Dayton Peace Accord was imposed on the country. And late Richard Holbrooke played a major role in that imposition. And he was blamed, the US was blamed, and everybody was blamed. But in the end, it worked out. And today we have two separate countries, and there is peace in the Balkans. In Sierra Leone, after all the atrocities that you have heard of and learned of in this century, when we're better informed than ever before, and maybe should have had greater feelings for humanity for others, the sort of atrocities that took place there, and in Liberia. In both of these countries, peace was imposed. And when I was working in Liberia in 2011, by the way, that was very significant to me going back to Liberia, because on that flight to Liberia, as I was approaching to land in Monrovia, for the first time ever, when the forms for immigration were issued, were given to us, I could feel I could fill in that column when it says citizenship, I could fill South Sudan. It was hard. But when I worked in Liberia in 2011, the army of Liberia, the chief of staff of Liberia, was a Nigerian. It was imposed by the UN at the time. But Liberia came out of that issue, out of the problem. It went through elections. It is now an independent country. The same thing for Sierra Leone. So I'm encouraged by the fact that despite all our reservations, leaders on both sides have said, for the sake of our people, for the sake of our country, to stop the bloodshed, to stop the suffering, we will agree to implement this agreement. And therefore it is incumbent upon us, and I think Ambassador Bak said it yesterday, we should not leave the government alone. We have a duty to play in making this agreement work. Because we could wait, we could say, well, we want things to be stretched out, we want the issue of sovereignty to be sorted out, the several reservations that we have to be resolved before we embark on this agreement. But what will be the consequences? The consequences will be grave. The bloodshed will continue, children and women will continue to die, thousands will fly and flee into neighboring countries, and we will be blamed by the international community, and many leaders will claim that they care more about our people than our own government. I'm sure we do not want that situation. Our economy is going through difficult times. It was estimated that the economic growth of the country in 2014 contracted by about 15%. We don't have access, or we should be reducing access to our own resources, particularly oil. And we do not want that to continue. So again, our compliments to our leaders who have taken courage. And history will not forget what decision they have taken. It takes a lot of courage. But it is our duty to make sure that we actually back them, we support them, and that is why this conference is so important. Because since yesterday, we have been debating, dialoguing, and brainstorming on how best we can take this country on the path of peace, democracy. How we can return this country from the place of suffering and agony and anarchy that we have towards peace, towards reconciliation, towards stability, towards recovery, towards reconstruction, towards development. So that is what it is. If you took stock of what we discussed yesterday and what we discussed today, these were very rich discussions, frank, candid, and that is exactly what it's supposed to be. We have benefited a lot from our youth, our women, the various political factions, our government, and also experts. I think we have all the solutions in our hands. I think we have the talent, we have the capacity, and we have the process of peace process, of making peace. But a lot of what we're going to embark on is going to mean change of behavior, change of personality, a change which takes time. So we may not, much as we got assurances that things can happen immediately, that may not be possible. It may take a little while. But I think the seed has been sown and we must push it as hard as we can. But I think there are a number of things that we can do which can enable the process to move forward. So I'm going to come with about 10 what I call keys that will really keys to peace, to the road to peace, which we should consider. Some of them may be outrageous, some of them may be unrealistic, some of them may be undoable, but what is important is that give me the credit of taking the courage to put them across to you. And please take those which you think are useful and throw away those you think are useless. The first one is what I call women power. And I will preface this by a joke that I always tell at conferences, so some of you must have heard. The joke is that in a large conference hall like this one, where we are today, there were about 100 men. So somebody says, all of those men who are controlled by their wives should move to the right. And so everybody moved to the right, except one. He went to the left and said, how is it possible that you are not controlled by your wife? Then he said, my wife told me that wherever I go, I should always go to the left. That's why I started by saying there are a few number of women here control all of us. And having lived with a very powerful woman for 42 years, my late wife, David Bassiouni. One can, you cannot believe me that this is a story that I keep telling. But my purpose of telling this story is this. Implementing the peace process of the South will be possible if you women decide that you want to do it. Because if it is men, our men who are the cause of problem for us in South Sudan, you who control them can make them make peace. That's right. Where is Mama Nyoka? In 2011, as we were going towards plebiscite, referendum, the women in Juba, before they came for the ESCA conference, challenged the men. They said, look, we want separation. We want independence. If you are not going to get it, get out of the way. We will do it. And that challenge worked. We went through the referendum and we now have a country. And Nyoka is there. Number two, what I call youth power. And I'm glad again, Mr. Chairman, for the forum that you created for youth, women, the political parties, elders, and so on. And we saw how youth presented. And by the way, I want to thank especially our youth who made that great contribution of 14 watches. Because in my house, everywhere you go there are watches. Because I cannot be comfortable without looking at the watch. So I really, my respect to you for that. Because youth are important, and as somebody said, we always said youth for the future, you are the future leaders, but when it comes to war, we said go and fight for us. But the important thing is this. Youth today are involved in the crisis, in the conflict. The militias that we have, some of them, large majority are youth. We have a high youth unemployment rate, but this is not peculiar to South Sudan. This is global, everywhere. And unless you do something about this youth unemployment, you give them a gainful livelihood or gainful alternative, our country is awash in arms, and it's youth who will have access to those arms. And whatever we do on our side to preach peace, to implement the agreement, there will be counter forces because our youth are not yet engaged fully. Look at just the White Army, what is going to happen, and the several militias who are there. So we have to do something important to our youth. Let me preface this also by another joke. So this son went to school, and when he came back, his father asked him, "My son, I hope you passed the exams." He said, "No, father. You know the standard of teachers has dropped these days. So I failed the exam." He said, "My son, why didn't you lower your standard so as to pass the exam?" So our youth are our asset, but they're also our problem. Because and I take particularly this country, a number of our youth have gone astray, and we have to reclaim them. We've talked about incarceration, how many are in prison, how many are working, and how many are actually dropping by the wayside, those who are unable to get education and educate themselves, and are not there to listen to their parents or elders. So to the youth, there is a challenge. But to us, there is a challenge for us, how we guide this youth, how we give them an alternative to life that they're living now. If not, then whatever success we are making, progress we are making, will also be reversed by this youth. Statesmanship is important, and the ability to accept responsibility is important. The ability to turn the other cheek and to accept blame are important. When I served in Nigeria in the mid-80s, I was speaking to a Nigerian professor, and I told him, if 4 out of 5 black people in the world are Nigerian, why has Nigeria not really pulled us out of, poverty and brought us to a level where people could recognize the black race? And he said, in Nigeria, we have not had a statesman as a leader. And by the way, in every century, every continent receives only one statesman. And in this century, we have had Mandela, we have had Nyerere. So we will have to wait for the next century. I say this because it is good. By the time we come to the next century, we will not be a country. So, or will not be any longer there. So we have to find our own statesman. But let us not always look at the government and say, well, Salva Kiir has to be statesman. Or Riek Machar must be statesman. Pagana Mu must be statesman. No. Amongst us, for this peace effort, we have to find a champion. So, my third point is that let us find and groom and grow a champion for peace. So that that particular person is the one who is associated with promoting peace. And government will look to that person. The civil society will look to this person. Women will look to him or her. A youth will look to that person. That is a champion. So if we can find that champion, champion for peace, then I think there is every opportunity that we are going to implement and we're going to get out of this crisis. So a champion for peace is important. Number 4 is what I call dividends of peace. Why do we want peace? We want peace in order to bring back normality, to bring back security and stability and activities that can return us to basic social services and development. So people want to see the results, the dividends of peace. And while we have very strong civil societies, the preaching that will be done in churches by activists and so on is empty if it is not built around dividends of peace. And a dividends of peace means what? Means that civil societies should be linked to projects, small ones like feeder road, digging well, establishing a dispensary, something that is tangible, so that when you preach about peace, you can demonstrate to these people that this is what peace means. So that is absent in what we do. It's unfortunate that we don't have with us Bishop Emeritus Paride Aban, because those who have known him as a peacemaker, what he did in Kuro, in eastern Equatoria, was to build a center, multi-purpose center for training, health, education, farming, agriculture, and use that as the basis for the reconciliation process that has gone on with several tribes in that area, very wide area, which he was able to achieve. And I was part of his, he received the Sergio Vieira de Mera Foundation award for that last year. And that is something which we need to do. We must demonstrate that dividend for peace. There is something that occurred in 2010, which people either downplay or actually do not remember. It was in May 2010 that President Salva Kiir Mayardit held the All South Sudanese Parties Conference. And not many people give him credit for that. This was the first time all South Sudanese, about 17 parties, held a conference under one roof in Juba in May 2010. And that conference was crucial in preparing the ground for the referendum. And what I'm proposing is that let us do another second all South Sudanese political parties dialogue on peace. So that at least this time you have everybody under, because everybody must come on board. If you leave anybody behind, you'll be a spoiler. So let us give credit to the President for having taken that initiative, but it is a framework that we can use again. And this dialogue that we need is actually something that we can do. That is my sixth key. The seventh one is SPLM. Let us take a little time to speak about that. Yesterday, I think there was a question posed by the moderator of the first panel, I think. Why is that most South Sudanese political factions name themselves SPLM? What is it in the name? What is it that is drawing us? Let me go back to maybe to the movement, and some who are better informed will be able to correct me. But I think SPLM was a very important political movement with an armed wing. But because of the struggle, because of the overwhelming military needs of the time, the political wing was perhaps received less importance than the military. And so when peace came, 2005, the party was still, in a stage of development. But there was one thing about the party, which was that everybody took it for granted that even if you are not a registered member of the party, you are SPLM. And all of us actually, that is how we have behaved and welcomed SPLM. When we were preparing towards elections, the first elections, 90% or 99% of South Sudanese want SPLM to win the elections. And one time I was sitting in we have very special groups of ours in this country, and friends, highly placed, influential friends, and we were conversing. This was after the election when SPLM won the elections. And they were saying, oh, there were a lot of rigging, corruption, and so on and so on. So I told them, well, you know me, I'm one of you. These are mostly American friends. And I said, I was out of the country. But if I was in the country, I would have taken part in the rigging. They said, how? I said yes, because we had stakes, very high stakes. If whether we like SPLM or we don't like SPLM, if SPLM did not win the elections, the chance of us going for a referendum would not be there. So we had a vested interest for SPLM to win. And indeed, they won. Later on, when we came to the referendum, it was not necessary to do any rigging because this was foregone. I remember very well when I was traveling from New York to Washington, D.C. to go and vote. And my daughter was with me, and she was asked by a Ghanaian friend, are you traveling with your father to? Yes, he said yes. What are you going to do? And she said, we are going to vote for independence. She did not say that they are going to vote in the referendum. Say independence. Because this was a foregone thing. It was a question of formality. And we were only thankful to IOM for organizing for us outside to go and vote. So, this is a party which is important. It is in the recent past. in the last maybe 20 years or so has played a major role. But now the question is, we're in a crisis. And again here we're thankful to the leaders for the effort to unify the wings of SPLM, particularly SPLM-IO, SPLM government and the former detainees. And that's a very good effort, and I think we all support it. Now, it's a good thing for the party because it is creating a larger tent. You know, one of the problems that the Republican Party faces in this country is that they are accused of narrowing things down, that they are actually not at all drawing and attracting people to that. But this is an opportunity. But within that tent, within that large tent, let there be a broad, shade of political opinions within SPLM. Let the people express themselves freely within that particular tent. Let there be a freedom of expression, and let there be a dialogue. Everybody should be welcome to do that. That is the way the party can grow. Other parties also should be allowed, to organize themselves, participate in the politics of South Sudan. Free for all. Democracy. Let people compete. And I think that is the way to go. And if in the course of time, SPLM is able to attract the majority of South Sudanese, it will remain a majority party. If it's not able to, it will go the way of the other parties, Kano and several others that have over time also changed. But the important thing is actually for us to see greater consolidation and coalition and collaboration within the party. But there is a challenge, and the challenge is home, and the challenge is here, Mr. Chairman, and that's where I have to stop praising you, because the challenge is grassroots organization. Are you able to do that? Leadership, we have no problem with that. People can belong to the Liberation Council and so on, but what about the grassroots? And that's why it's so important. These people who are lingering there, I'm a member of the Liberation Council or Council of State, let them go down and organize the grassroots. And the same thing with us here in the US. There's no point in us calling ourselves an SPLM if we have not actually organized our grassroots. So that's a challenge that whenever the next convention is going to come, it is a question of organizing the party. One of the most successful parties in Sudan was the Sudan Socialist Union under Liberia. It was a grassroots organization, whether you like it or not, because it involved everybody. And that way, when you have consensus, just get it through. So there is a challenge there for all of us. The diaspora is my, I think, maybe 7th or 8th, I think the 8th point. If you look at the diaspora of the other countries in Africa, and by the way, since I left UN in 2010, we have a company, we formed a company, the Bassiouni Group, which is a consulting, trade and investment company. And it has allowed us to work a lot with the African countries, particularly Ethiopia, Kenya, Rwanda, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Ghana. And one of the things that I've learned a lot about it is sort of efforts which are going on in these countries, which is of relevance to us, and that is something of a different, I think we will have another venue to speak about the development efforts in these countries. But one of the things that I have done about diaspora, I'll pick two examples. One is Ethiopia. Ethiopia created a department in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for diaspora. It created branches in all of its 10 regions for diaspora. It has a very active interaction with diaspora through this means. It is diaspora who are playing a major role, supported by the government, in directing investment into Ethiopia. And today, Ethiopia is the fastest growing economy in the world, growing at the rate of 10% per annum. And this is just one example of how diaspora can play a role. But they also assist the diaspora by giving them a number of facilities, land, trade, whatever it is that they're able to. They're involved very much. Rwanda is the same thing. That today, Rwanda, which has no resources, no resource base, is also one of the highest growing countries in Africa. A lot of it is actually due to their diaspora population. So we have a potential here. I think yesterday also Ambassador Bach challenged the diaspora on what they should be doing for their country. I think we should challenge the government now, that they should do something about turning these assets of diaspora into a useful asset for the country. Because a lot of things can happen. And I will come later on to the question of the relationship with the USA. I think also we heard yesterday, relationship with the USA has been strained between us and USA. And that was not there before. I will talk more about this whole thing about my next point, about the importance of rebuilding this relationship. It's not the job of the embassy. It's not the job of the ambassador or back. It is the job of the South Sudanese Americans who are, I'm looking at that. It is your job to build the bridges between your country, your host country now, and their own country. Oh, that is your job, one of the most important for you. And here we are not doing that. And you can do that very easily through your senators, through your representatives. So you have a major, major role to rebuild that. And the government then comes into it later. Because now when ambassador gets out to defend the country, they will dismiss him and say, he's just, he's a president governor of Sudan, he's just defending this blindly. But you should be in that position to create that. So one challenge I would like to leave, on the one hand, I would like the interim government that is coming in to do something tangible about, organizing and tapping into these rich resources of diaspora. On the other hand, I would like to challenge the diaspora that they have a major role to play in rebuilding relationship with South Sudan, between US and South Sudan. I come to something called unexpected child. Usually, if a woman is expecting, they said she's pregnant, they said she's expecting because everybody is happy to see that child come. But many of you may not realize that actually South Sudan was an unexpected child. Why? In this century, there have been two independent countries. One was East Timor. East Timor in 2004. East Timor came into being from Indonesia. It was the first independent country of the 21st century. And the second one was South Sudan. And South Sudan, when it was on the march towards referendum and beyond, there were a lot of unknowns as to whether South Sudan, even after this overwhelming vote, would become independent or not. Part of it was the West believed very strongly, and even to this day that is not gone yet, that the way to hold Sudan, Khartoum, is not to take away South from there. The hold on Khartoum is through South. That is one fact. Number two, the AU has never believed in any new countries coming to be, because it would be like a, what do you call it, monitoring effect, or what is the rippling effect. If you have one country separate, one part of a country separate, that will, boomerang. And so, you would never be in favor of that. The North, we know, will not, of course, be there. But nevertheless, God wanted South Sudan to come into being, and we got this obstacle for to prove it. And again, here my really personal appreciation to the President. After independence, when South Sudan was to be admitted into the United Nations, the President asked me to join Dr. Machar as part of the official delegation. I know up to now no official title or position in the government, but I was asked to join the delegation, and I think that was perhaps the greatest honor my country could give me. Now the problem was, because no country expected South Sudan or expected another country to come independent, there was no seat in the General Assembly for Sudan. There was nothing, physically there was nothing. So there was a problem. How could the new country be accommodated? There were two possibilities. One possibility was that the Holy See, the Pope's seat, should be given to South Sudan. People say, well, this, you are now going to God. I mean, you are asking God. So this was dismissed. The second one was Palestine's observer seat. And people said, look, these people have been fighting for independence for over 50 years, over 40 years. And now you came from, only the other day, you become independent. And of all the places in the world, you come and take their seat. So, again, that was, at last, Mauritius, small island of Mauritius, offered its seat to South Sudan. And that was it's a very beautiful story, but not many people know. Why? Because there was no seat. So that is how we came, unexpected. But that shows to you that because of that, we need to value our country. We need to know that this is God-given. And so I just wanted that story because it is so important that we know where we came from and where we are going. My fifth point is creating the space for everybody, part of our unity. If we make our own people strangers in their own country, they will feel annihilated and they will have no stake in the country. So, what is it that can keep us together and unify us? In the past, it was the North, the threat of the North. And now, the threat of the North is no longer there, unless we want to bring it back as a unifying factor. But otherwise, it is no longer there. And therefore, we have to look at what are the things that worked. In our generation, there were very few schools in the South. The intermediate schools, which was very important before Rumbek, there was Loka, Busere, Rumbek, Okaro, Atar. Yeah. These were the melting pot for nationalism and studying and interacting and know each other at an early stage. Then that will be a beginning of building a nation. If we do not do that, we are preparing ourselves for problems. Marginalization, which has come up time and again, is that some people feel they're marginalized. Recently, after the announcement of the 28 states, I was speaking to one particular compatriots. In that particular state, there are 3 tribes: a major tribe, a medium one, and a small one. And this small tribe is the most vocal, the loudest of them, complaining and so on. So I told him, now that you have a state, how are you going to contain this small tribe? And he said, we have got a formula already. What I said, what is the formula? He said, we are going to appoint as our first governor from the smallest tribe, and the deputy from the second tribe, and the third, the largest, will be the speaker. I was very impressed. I was really impressed. And he said, and then I said, then what happens next? He said, we have also agreed on a rotation system, where in the next round, we will also take the people around. The second becomes the governor, and so on and so on and so on. So this is something which is, to me, coming from them alone, from people thinking alone. South Sudanese. This is what I call giving space. You know, it's so important. Today, one of the things that dominated the panels was the bitter complaint of the Anuak, who feel that actually they are an endangered species and they are dying out. Nobody is standing up for them. And that there is no representation, or there is domination. I think we should be able to find a formula for such a thing. And I think it's proper that the principle of progress by merit, qualification merit, I think we will not compromise on it. But nevertheless, we should find a way of representation. If, for example, we were to elect a state assembly, or about 100, or let's take the National Assembly, or maybe 200 members, it is within our prerogative to include in our constitution that a certain percentage of those should be retained, especially for minorities and for regions that will not be able to represent themselves in parliament, so that at any given time a National Assembly will have the 64 tribes of South Sudan included there, because it's a formative action. peace. And there is nothing wrong with that. That is something for us. It is for us. That is what Nimeri did with women. He had affirmative action. Certain constituencies were actually, or certain percentage was actually retained for women, which of course now is also in force at this government. So that is something which we can actually be able to do ourselves, and it's something that we will be able to ensure that representation, it is possible for us to make sure that we are all there. But we must create that space. We must be able to share power. If we're not ready for that, then whatever we do is not going to end in any success. Finally, I want to end up with a story about 79. Oil had been discovered, and Nimeri created the unity state. And we knew there was now a problem because of this crisis. So, under the leadership of Kevin Boro, we wrote a very challenging letter to President Jaffa Nimeri, in which we questioned his right over this. And we were arrested, or all the political leaders were arrested. The main accusation against us was that in our letter to President Nimeri, we signed ourselves as Council for South Sudan. Now, during those times, you don't call South, you call Southern. By calling South, it means that you have already rebelled. So, we were taken to Kobar. We were arrested in Juba, and then we stopped in Wow to pick Glimmer Boro, and then we ended up in Kobar. Now there is a light story and then the main story. The light story is that Gama Hassan, who was my minister, was with us, and late Justin Yard. And so Gama was in the prison where we were. He was his bed was near the door. So Justin told him that, Gama, you know, executions that take place. You know, the people, they come, and sometimes they are not sure who is to be. So they may pick the closest person. So Gama, David, come, and then Justin, after Gama moved away, Justin took his bed and put it in that place. that is the light part. The more serious part was when we signed our names. We signed the name of Matthew Obur, but Matthew was not in Juba. Matthew was in Malacca, but we signed his name that he was there. Then after we were in prison for about 4 or 5 days, Matthew was brought from Malacca. And when he was brought, we were all sitting, and we came. He was dressed in a white African suit, very proud with his chest up. So after he came in, we said, Matthew, well, we're sorry we included your name. He said, no, the proudest moment of my life is the fact that you included my name without consulting me. And he said, I'm bigger than a shuluk. And what I tell to you is that you are bigger than a tank. You are bigger than a Nuer. You are bigger than Zanzibar. You are bigger than North. You are bigger than South Sudan. You are a member of the international community. And with that, thank you.
Chabab gumfok election jai ya comrade collect kun mana as pialam bawin as pialam bafat ya comrade